Good afternoon, everyone. Wow, it's still a great turnout for it to be the second day. I know that everyone is already super tired. I am as well. But I promise this talk is going to be interesting. Just maybe the slides, I try to skip through them, and then the coding part, I do some live coding, is going to be super interesting. So today I'm going to talk about Vue 3 virtual DOM and how can we build it ourselves. As Debbie mentioned, my name is Marc. This is where you can find me on Twitter. That's my handle. If you have any questions after the talk, just send me your questions there and I will answer them. That's where I hang out most of the time. All right, I'm from Luxembourg. I'm the DevRel lead at We Are Developers, where I help organize amazing events, virtual and in person. For example, if you go to worldcongress.dev, it's a super cool congress we organize every year. I'm the core organizer of Bellevue, which I do together with the next speaker, Sibren, and some other people, so that's cool. And I am a student pilot, which is taking up a lot of my time. So in the picture, here you see that picture was taken right after my very first flight lesson. The plane in the background is a Piper PA-28 for aviators around you that are interested. And so yeah, that's me, and let's start getting into the topic. So, virtual DOM. What is virtual DOM? To answer this question, we first have to see what is a DOM, okay? So we know DOM is a document object model. But what does it mean? It's a programming interface between programming interface for HTML and XML, and this is important for us in the live coding. It represents the document as a tree of nodes. So we have one node, then we have like so-called children. Could be one, could be several, and that can have children until it's done at some point, right? And it can be accessed and manipulated via JavaScript. Okay, and this is how such a DOM looks like. This is actually part of the DOM from the vue3.org website. So you can see here some elements and some more things that we go into a little bit more detail in a second. All right, so now we know what is a DOM, but what is now a VDOM? Well, it's a virtual document object model. And that means that it's a virtual representation of the actual DOM, of the actual browser DOM. So for example, we can use JavaScript objects for this. It lives in the memory of the browser, and it is synced up with the real DOM, with the actual browser DOM. Vue uses this under the hood to render the DOM tree at the end. And not only Vue does this, also other frameworks such as React. But fun fact, Petite Vue does not have a virtual DOM. Okay, so, but why should we do this? Just hang on 1 second. All right, why should we use a virtual DOM? It decouples the rendering logic from the real DOM. It's easier to manipulate and to go through, sort of inspect the DOM than going through the real nodes in the browser. And it's easy to reuse. For example, if you want to use it in a native environment, mobile or something, WebGL, there can be done stuff with this. All right, so let's take a look at our template syntax that we know and love. This is a very easy example. There is a div, and it has two children, an H1 and a P tag. Okay, so what happens with this now? There are a few steps this goes through. First, it's compiled into a render function, that template. Then it returns the virtual DOM tree, and at the very end, this is either mounted to the real DOM or so-called patched. Patched is when there's an update in the interface, and we can see it in the real DOM. And here on the bottom, we have the reactivity engine from Vue 3. So when something changes, this render function gets computed again, and the virtual DOM tree gets generated, and then it's patched into the actual DOM. Okay, let's take another look at the DOM. Here, a simpler example. And we can already identify a few things here. For example, all of this, what is this? These are HTML tags. So let's just write this down. These are tags. Then we have these things here. These are, well, these are classes, attributes, or something. Let's just call it, for now, properties. And then we have this and this, which this is where it gets a little bit confusing. We just call this children, even though you see in the first example where it just says fruit, it's not really children, it's just text, but it's called children, and that's going to be important when we implement the virtual DOM in a second. All right, how do we create our virtual nodes? For that, we use a function that's called h, or the h function, or h stands for hyperscript, so JavaScript that produces HTML. And it takes three arguments: the tag, the props, and the children. So this is, so we can already see how this represents the DOM that we saw earlier. All right, so let's take a look how this could look like. So there are a few ways this could look like. For example, like this, we pass h1, like this is an h1 tag, and this is class. So a short side note here, I use everywhere Tailwind classes to style. So just so you know what's happening here. And then the children, or the child in this case, it's just a text. That's the first option. The second option is very similar, but the children or the child is another node, which then has a text. And then there is a third option, where there's an array of other nodes. So this is where the word children makes sense. All right, so we are going to build our own virtual DOM, and for that we need four functions. One, we need to create our virtual nodes, the very basic one, so the h function or the hypertext. We need to mount this somehow onto the DOM. We just call this mount. We need to unmount elements as well from the DOM, just remove it from the DOM altogether. We call that unmount. And then we have a function that updates the DOM. This is by far the most complex of all of this, and we're just going to implement a small simplified version of it. But we call this patch. All right, now it's time for some live coding. I will take a sip of water, and then we are good to go. All right. So, first question, the font size, is it big enough for the people in the back? Yes? Good, perfect. Okay, so let me show you my project here. For now, for us interesting is just an index.html file. Some VDOM examples we will look at later, and our VDOM. So let's take a look at the HTML. It's just a basic HTML file. 5 example. We have some positioning and styling here. And here's our app. In this point, our app is going to be mounted, and we can already see this here at the bottom. Then we pull the h and the mount function from our virtual DOM that we will implement in a second. And yeah, that's basically it. Then we read out the app here, this element, and then we just mount it. Okay. Then we have a few examples. I will go through later, but there's a few examples of different things we can do in the virtual DOM, but this is for later. Now, interesting is this, our virtual DOM, which now is completely empty. So let's start by just writing our first virtual DOM. So const vdom is then h, let's say h1, and then as props or objects here, we just put null. So we don't want any complications there, and we just say hello. This is what we want to render. And here on the right side, it should render, but it doesn't because we haven't implemented anything yet. So we can still see our DOM is empty here. And now we start coding our virtual DOM in this file. So Let's start by adding a few functions. First is the h function, then the mount, then we need the unmount, and then at the end we need the patch. All right, so let's start with the h function. So this is a very flat hierarchy. It has just the three, the tag, the props, and the children. All right. And what do we do with this? This is very easy. We just return it as is, but in an object. So we can just copy this here. We return as an object, and this is already done. This is all this hypertext function does. All right, now it gets a little bit more interesting. So we can see that nothing happened yet because our mount function isn't implemented. So here we need two things. One is a virtual node, and a virtual node is what is returned from this h function. We just call this a virtual node, okay? And here is a container where it's mounted into, so we just call this container. And so here is where we will mount the whole thing, and we will just start by creating an element, a DOM element. So element, or L, is, and then document.create element. And here would be something like h1, but we already know where this data is coming from. We have, like, just to summarize this again, we have the tag. It's going to be something like h1. We have the props. It's going to be something like class text red 500. And we have the children, which in the simplest case is just something like hello. Okay, so just so we have in mind what's happening here. Okay, so we want the h1 here, so the tag. We just say vnode.tag. And then we need to mount this onto the actual DOM or the container. So we have the container here. And we'll just say container.append child. And what do we add? Well, we add the element that we just created here, so L. Let's save this, and let's see what happens. Can I expand this recursively? OK, something happened. We already mounted something here, the h1, but it doesn't have a text yet. You remember we put no props, but we said hello is the text that we want to display. So we just need to start working on that. So let's say our element gets a text content of what? vnode dot, and this is where it gets confusing, dot children, even though it's just one text, but let's see what happens. And voila, we have our first element rendered onto the real DOM. Thanks a lot for that, but there is more. There always is. Okay, so now it's time to look at our examples here. So let me just remove this VDOM we made here, and here, let me just, we don't see anything. Way better. Okay, so we import the VDOM1 example, and we use it as VDOM, and we mount it as previously. So what is in here? In here is also the h function, also an h1, but this time it does have properties. It changes the text color, some size, and it makes it bold, and it says Vue.js Amsterdam. Okay, let's see what happens. Something renders, but it's not orange, it's not big, and it's also not bold. So why is that? Because we pass here our props, but we don't do anything with it. We need to handle the props. So just handle props, and what we're going to do is just a good old-fashioned for key in and this vnode.prop. So we just iterate through these. The key is going to be, for example, class, and then the value is going to be whatever it is we put, for example, text size and so on. So here we need to do something like the element.set attribute, and it needs to be something like class and then something else. But we have this. So this is key. And what is the value? The value is the vnode.props of this key. Let's see. And this works, so cool. We are one step further to make this work better. Okay, let's see our second VDOM. So here it's interesting. It's a button, and we have an on-click event here. Let's check out how this works. So let's just change to our VDOM 2 here, and we have a button. When we click it, nothing happens. So let's take a look at what happens in the DOM actually. And here it says on-click is, and then the function, and this is not really how it works. So we need to do something like the condition. If the key starts with on, then it's an event, right? Else it's just an attribute. Okay. What we would do here is element.add event listener, and something like click, and then here the function, okay. But we have now on click, and we want to convert this into click, so we need to do some text transformation here. Let's just do that very quick. Const event name is, and then the key dot, and then is it slice or is it splice? Let's just say it's slice, the two first characters off. Then we have click with a capital C and just make it to lowercase. Okay, now we should have made out of onClick this click thing. And let's see. We have this here. And here, what we will add here is the same as below. Just the value that's there, and in this case, it's just a function. Save this. Let's try the click. And it works. Okay. Thank you once again. Okay, to the next example. I see we have 7 minutes left. Still some way to go. So here's interesting. Here we, instead of a text, we actually have a another node. So, and this is not going to work. So this is VDOM 3. Let's try to render this. And we don't, maybe you don't see it because of the colors, but it says just like this, the classic object. We don't want this. So let's see. Instead of here, we just assume it's a text, but it's not always a text. Let's just say if the type of these children, vnode.children, if that is a string, then we replace it with it, or then we put the text. So now it's empty, which is good because we don't want the object, but what do we do instead? Well, now we do something that a lot of developers, including me, have problems with: recursive thinking. So we call this same function again, mount. And what do we mount? We mount the children, which in this case is not children, it's just child. It's just one node. And where do we mount it onto? Some element. Which element? Well, the one that we just created here on top. Let's try. Element. And it works. So that's the third example. Thank you very much. So now the next one is a biggie. Here we have a div that has an array of a few different things for an array of a node, a regular node here, and then another node that has again an array. So we need to render out this children, in this case, really children. Oh, I just have 5 minutes left. So let's pick up the pace a little bit. But let's see, how can we do this? We have here, if it's a string, and then we just assume it's another node, but it could also be a list of nodes, or well, an array of nodes. Well, let's just say if this is an array, so array.isArray, the vnode.children, then we do something different. What do we do here? Well, let's just iterate over these with for each. And we have per child. What do we do? Well, we mount it the same as here on the bottom. Just mount the child onto the element. Let's see. Oh, it was the VDOM 4. Oh, we have a small error here. What? else if, yeah, else if. Thank you. Okay, thanks a lot. So it worked. I would say I buy you a beer later, but it's free, so. Okay, so this is cool. Now, this is really interesting because now we have almost a full structure with this, but it's not over yet. A few more, actually 2 more. Here we have ducks, monkeys, and goats, and they are rendered here, the ducks, monkeys, and goats. And we just want to unmount one of these. So let's see how this looks like. VDOM 5. Yeah, so I don't have no time for no monkey business from Freddie Mercury. And when we click here, how does this look like? Well, we unmount the monkeys. Okay, but we don't have an unmount function. Well, we have one, but it's not implemented. So we pass a vnode here, and we want to do something like this. The HTML element dot parent node, and then remove child, and then just the element. But we don't have an element here yet. We just have a vnode. So let's just go where we create this vnode. Let's just set it vnode.element is L, a little bit cheating here. And then we also have this HTML element available here. So instead of L, we just say vnode.l. And let's see. Let's reload this. And the monkeys are gone. So 1 more to go, 2.5 minutes. Let's do it. Okay, the next one is patching, which is very complicated. And I will implement just a very easy way of doing this. Well, let's actually first load this. So when we click patch, we want something to happen. We want the DOM to be basically updated. So it looks like this. We have one DOM here with a few things, and we want to see the differences, and we want to update the DOM if necessary. Okay, let's just do something like if the children of the vnode 2, so the new one, vnode 2 is vnode 2 is the new one. So if vnode 2.children, well, actually the type of children again is string, then just set the vnode 1 the element. We have it now because we set it before. Dot element text content is this children. And if it's not, we just assume it's a list, it's an array of other nodes to make it as easy as possible. So let's just write a good old for I function. Nice, I smaller than vnode children length. Ooh. Length, and we just increment it. And then we do this. We just replace every node with the next child of the same index. So it's basically patch vnode1.children index I with the index, vnode 2 children index I. So let's see if this works. If this worked, and it's not a bug. It is a bug. Okay, let's vnode 2.children. Okay, let's again. It's not a bug. It is a bug. Okay. Let me just patch. Let I equal 0. Yes, that's it. Thank you. Yes, it's not a bug, it's a feature. Ten seconds to go. I was going to show you how we can build the reactivity into this, but there is no time. But there is a repo you can check. So just scan this. This is a GitHub repo with all of what I just coded now, and a file that's called reactivity.html, which shows how we can make all of this reactive as well. The demo is pretty cool, but I went over time. But that's it. Thanks a lot for your attention and for the help in the coding.